Hello, my friends. My name is Darren Gerdes. It is Sunday, November 24th, 2024, and this is three big stories, but it's really nine big stories today. Every day when I put this together, I'm like trying to move puzzle pieces around to make sense of what's actually happening. This is what it feels like in my life as I'm trying to help you understand what's going on in the news. Okay, the Russian state TV is telling Russians today the situation is more acute than in 1962 Cuban Missile Crisis. Then there were just two players, Khrushchev and Kennedy. They were in contact, had private talks. Today, there is no contact between leaders of Russia and the US, and there are multiple levels to this, and hostilities are underway. Now, you have to ask yourself, one, is that true, first of all? Maybe it is. But second, you have to ask yourself, why are they telling their Russian audience that thing? And then you have to wonder, like, what's the value both to the Russian audience and to the international community that they're projecting that? And that helps you kind of work out what's going on with the puzzle piece. Does this fit? Does this not fit? Because, like, for example, do the Russians actually want peace? Is this a way to get toward peace? I know that this isn't a way to get toward peace. The Russian weapons production outpaces EU by a factor of 4, German defense minister warns. Here's how this works. For every month of EU weapons production, the Russians can do it in a week. So they're doing 4 times the amount. So does that make sense of the jigsaw of that they actually want peace, or are they actually going toward more war? You have to ask yourself those kind of questions. Then there's this. Russia is assembling T entities around the globe in Europe's east in order to invade civilization. And this will not happen only there. It will happen around the globe, if not stopped in their tracks. What are we talking about? Russia is recruiting Yemeni mercenaries to fight in Ukraine. And there's a number of stories about this. Hundreds of Houthis were sent to Russia and are participating in the war in Ukraine, apparently in exchange for Russia's security assistance to the Houthis. The Houthis, recruited by the Russian army, said in return that they were promised high salaries and even Russian citizenship, according to the Financial Times. But you got to read more. Like, again, the jigsaw works when you can fit the piece after you have read and triangulated on multiple sources. Here's a little bit more Radio Free Europe talking about it. The November 23 report said that they were helped by Houthi-linked company to travel to Russia, then forcibly inducted into the Russian army and sent to the front lines in Ukraine. So that's not the same thing as what it sounded like, where you're hearing, oh, that, yeah, these guys are coming. They just looking for a fight. Let's kill the infidels or whatever it is that they're looking at. The reports said the action illustrates how the Kremlin is desperately trying to avoid full mobilization of its society by using foreign fighters. And that, again, the puzzle piece, that makes sense of this. Dmitry Peskov yesterday saying there's no need for mobilization in Russia since Russians themselves are actively signing contracts with the Ministry of Defense to participate in the war. And I was saying, like, yeah, there's more to the story, but okay, it makes sense. The puzzle piece makes sense. This guy, I think, is in a world of trouble if he just sticks around. Magnet, a Russian supermarket chain, has begun hiring employees from Africa amid a personnel shortage. Now, that could be just fitting the number of, backfilling the people that they need to run the supermarket. And this might look like a good gig for him. But again, the puzzle piece, is he going to be in trouble if he does something wrong or crosses, jaywalks and gets arrested and then has to go sign up? Oh, you want your freedom? Well, go sign up for the war in Ukraine. Things like that have happened. Okay, let's go to the next big story. Orthodox Church, the Russian Orthodox Church, could be a cover for Russian spies in Europe. Well, they were already doing it in Ukraine, and we know that they were doing it in Ukraine. So again, the puzzle piece, does it make sense that they might have been doing it in Europe? Russian spies are active in Europe. There is no argument. However, new investigation uncovers the potential for espionage under the cover of religious activities of the Russian Orthodox Church across the EU, in Sweden, in Finland, in Czech Republic. Yeah, there's a number of ways that they're doing this kind of thing. And we know they already did it before in another place. So it's quite plausible that they could be doing it now in other places in Europe. Okay, Next big story, Russia is launching North Korean KN-23 missiles at Ukraine equipped with Western components. That's the interesting part of this because we know that they've been launching these missiles. According to CNN, Ukrainian officials confirmed that while the metal is from North Korea, the electronics and missile control systems are foreign made. So sanctions work, but they don't always work, right? So sanctions help add pressure, but they always work to try to get around the pressure whenever they're applying sanctions. Like that's what happens in the scenario with sanctions. Next big story. This is huge. Chinese hackers allegedly spied on 150 U.S. politicians, including Trump and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. Hackers reportedly accessed calls and messages by infiltrating major U.S. telecom operators. Senator Mark Warner called it the worst hack in the country's history. That would be worse than what Russia has done in 2016 if it's the worst hack. Like, that's pretty impressive. Trump's not going to be very happy about this when he gets into power. FBI Director Christopher Wray stated that China's hacking program surpasses all others combined. Like, that's really crazy. We'll see more about this story in the future, I'm sure. Okay, let's start looking at next big story, which is all about the economy in Russia. I mean, every day I seem to see this, and I didn't talk about this yesterday or the day before, and so I have a few items here that's just stacked to help you kind of see what's going on with the Russian economy. The UAE, Turkish banks stop servicing Union Pay cards from Russia's Gazprom Bank. That's important. They're stopping playing nice with them. According to TASS, the UAE, United Arab Emirates, and Turkish banks have ceased operations with them. And yeah, and the comment here was, and they say sanctions don't work. And I would have highlighted it, except sanctions sometimes do and sanctions sometimes don't work. In this case, it's working. Britain's largest bank no longer accepts payments from Russia. Well, that just happened. And it's 3 years into the war. And this was, what, yesterday, day before? November 23rd. It's the 24th today. So they finally did it. Okay, it takes a while sometimes. Russia's bond market collapse is picking up steam. Now, I'm no expert at the bond market, so I'm just going to give you the headline and move on as just another piece of evidence that this is what's happening. I can't interpret that for you, and I apologize. It's not my strong suit. Okay, Jason J. Smart. In 2.5 months, the Russian ruble has lost greater than 22% of its value. In the past 1 month, the ruble has lost 10% of its value. In the past 5 days, the ruble has lost 5% of its value. It's picking up steam. How do you go bankrupt? Gradually, then suddenly, according to Hemingway. Yeah, it's at 104. I showed you at 102. I showed you at 100.5 just a few days ago when down here. Something's going on with the ruble. So, okay, that's what we know about how bad the situation is in Russia, that we're starting to see this happen again and again and again. Like Ben Hodges talks about how Russians are in big trouble and they know it. Their only hope is that we quit. Yes, that is their hope. Now, that makes some sense of this, of why they're saying things are so dire, it's so bleak, because if you're talking to the West and you're trying to fit the puzzle piece of, oh no, we're going to have nuclear war, that's what they're trying to push out there, because their hope is so bleak, because of all these things happening, as Ben Hodges is talking about. Yeah, I think that fits the picture. Okay, Russian economy is now critically weak. Its reserves will run out in a year. Inflation is rising 9%. Right, ruble rate is falling and not mitigated by ever higher interest rates at 21%. Usually, the higher the interest rate, you're going to have other things happen in opposite of that higher interest rate, or when you lower the interest rate, opposite things happen. Despite shortages of labor and soldiers, sharp public criticism, you can even see that criticism come out in surveys where people are like thinking about negotiation at a 53% of the country is like, yeah, let's have a negotiation instead of pressing on. Just showed you that 2 days ago. Okay, so that's what's going on with the Russian economy. Next big story, let's look at American politics. Jay in Kiev commenting, Lindsay knows exactly how to get through to Trump. This will be music to his ears, this kind of thing. Ukraine is not only the richest country in Europe in terms of rare earth minerals, but in every other natural resource. And he went out and talked about, hey, that's make a good deal for them, a good deal for us. Everybody gets better off, right? I showed the larger video just the other day. But yeah, I think that's right. You can speak Trump's language if you know how to speak it. Here's Michael McCall. Michael McCall is the House Foreign Affairs Committee chairman in the U.S. House of Representatives. I want you to hear what he has to say. Just 1 minute of this. He's a Republican, and I'm showing you a number of Republicans. I'm of the mind that you're probably not going to see a lot of this about other Republicans in other places, but I'm highlighting these guys for a reason so that you understand how they actually think and operate.
Yeah, I agree. Let's go. What was Putin's goal? It was to divide and weaken NATO. Just the opposite occurred. It's now more united than it's ever been, and it's stronger than it's with the ascension of Sweden and Finland, two great superpowers, if you will, in terms of military. The strength they bring to NATO is phenomenal. So now Putin is seeing that what he did is actually not working the way he had planned. I would say that he was the one losing, not Ukraine. But we can't allow Ukraine to fall. I think President Trump's right about this. I still believe he has voices in his head, in his ear, like myself, like Mr. Waltz, who was on my committee, like Rubio.
Okay, he's talking about Michael Waltz, who was just appointed to be the replacement for Jake Sullivan, or nominated to be the replacement for Jake Sullivan, and Rubio, who's nominated to become the Secretary of State. And both of them have historically been war hawks.
Like Mike Pompeo and Robert O'Brien and like-minded, people probably more back from the Reagan era, that we can't afford to lose this fight.
Okay, so this is the way that he's thinking, and a number of other Republicans. In contrast, you have something like this. RFK Jr. blames the United States for Putin's invasion of Ukraine. We want a war with Russia, he says in July of 2023. And he's another nominee, except he's a nominee for Health Human Services, has nothing to do with Ukraine. Yeah, he'd be in the cabinet. Yeah, he's nuts, but I don't think you need to worry about him. Meanwhile, Taiwan's former president says that the U.S. should prioritize weapons to Ukraine over Taiwan. Think about that. Why? Because if Ukraine wins, if Ukraine prevails, the odds that China will try to take Taiwan decrease significantly. So, yeah, that's the right strategy, supporting Ukraine. Here's Senator Mike Rounds. I mentioned him the other day, but I didn't actually go into it. Senator Mike Rounds gets emotional as he talks about the sacrifice of older Ukrainians who volunteered to go to the front line to save the younger generation. So there will actually be a nation after the war. We betrayed our obligation to defend Ukraine when they disarmed their nukes. Like we have a moral obligation. But I want you to hear the next minute and a half of what he has to say.
But folks, it's time to take a hard look at this thing and really ask ourselves, do you believe that this tyrant, if you offer him a part of a free country, do you think he's going to stop? No. Or do you think he's going to have to go back home and say, you see, when we stand strong, the weak, the West, these people who are decadent, do you think for 1 second he's going to turn around and walk back in and say, but we most certainly have our freedom now, that we've been defended by this and that we have everything we need? Or do you think he's going to look at that and say, you see, we're strength, we're Russian strength? See, I think that's what happens. Mm-hmm. I think the best thing in the world that we can do is make our commitment to Ukraine, allow them to participate in deciding whether or not victory is actually achieved, and whether or not Russia would continue to support a tyrant as the body bags continue to come home. I wish I could say there was an easy way out. There is not. And while the vast majority of all wars end with a peace treaty, it didn't happen in Germany. It didn't happen in Japan. I fear, as much as I would love to say that there is a path towards a peaceful resolution to this by negotiating with this tyrant, I suspect that we may be deceiving ourselves.
I think that's right. I think that's exactly right. I mean, if you go back and look at the history and the jigsaw piece puzzles, what's going on with Putin, I don't think he wants peace at all. Okay, so that was Mike Rounds. Mike Rounds, by the way, is a Republican junior senator from South Dakota. where Thune is from, the now Senate Majority Leader elect is from as well. Okay, this is Representative Don Bacon. Don Bacon is from Nebraska. Be prepared to pay more if dictator Putin prevails in Ukraine. This is 1939 all over again. So I'm showing you, here's a Republican saying this, here's another Republican saying this, here's another Republican saying this, and another Republican saying the same kind of things. There is a good deal of Republican support. It's not necessarily Trump's point of view, but Trump can be influenced the right direction, as Lindsey Graham was pointing out. All right. And meanwhile, Anton Yuroshenko posted this. Putin's friend and part-time president of the National Research Center, Mikhail Kovalchuk, demanded that the West pay Russia money for air. And his reason was that we have the largest forested area. This means that we absorb carbon dioxide and we don't have enough of it. They should pay us for cleaning the planet. Do you know why you have the largest forested area? It's not because you're Captain Planet. It's because you haven't been able to figure out what to do with the amount of land that you have because you're not that productive. Okay, I saw this and I thought, wow, that's really interesting. Al-Qaeda-linked militants attack Wagner PMC convoy in Mali. At least 6 mercenaries were killed and their transport burned and their bodies left at the scene. Now, this is all I could show you from that video because it's really, really graphic. All you're seeing is a field here, and I can't show you the rest of it. But who do you root for between Al-Qaeda and Wagner PMC? I mean, that's a weird one. Darth Putin, the parody website, says on this day in 2015, the country of Turkey shot down a Russian jet in their airspace after we kept violating the border. Our response was to sanction Turkish tomatoes. So, in fact, they also shot down our red lines. Yeah, they didn't do anything to Turkey about that. And, in fact, when they kept pushing, Turkey showed them exactly where the boundaries were. Keep violating our airspace, this is going to happen. Try it again. But the West, writ large, hasn't figured out this is how Russia behaves. If they push against the borders and then they get their hand slapped, they stop. And that's how it works. Okay, last little bit. I saw this. What I learned from group projects. The red bar is the information, not a lot. How to work with people, blue, very little. How to do entire projects on my own, yellow. How much I hate people, green. I saw this and I thought, there is an analog here. Now I see this happen too. And by the way, if you set up good group projects, you can avoid this happening because you assign responsibility for different pieces of the puzzle, but set that aside. That's how you would actually do it. But most of you have endured group projects in high school or college and you were like, I really hate this. I wish I could do it all myself. This kind of has to feel like how Zelensky's feeling with partners that they don't get the material to them when they need. They promise, they say this, and then it doesn't materialize. Meanwhile, he has to figure out how to move the pieces around, and it's got to be terribly, terribly frustrating. Anyway, that's just how my mind works when I think about the puzzle pieces of what's going on in Ukraine. All right, I hope this puzzle piece analogy helped you think through this. If it did, please put a comment below. Thank you for your time. Thank you for the likes, the shares, and the subscribes. And thank you for being the kind of person that cares about Ukraine.